Have you ever stopped to think about fonts? Not just notice them, but really think about them? Everywhere you look, street signs, books, websites, your phone, there are fonts. Some are clean and modern, some are elegant and curly, and some look like they belong in a medieval manuscript. But why do we have different fonts? Why not just one simple way to write? Well, to answer that, we need to look back, way back, to when writing itself began. Let's get into it, right here, on History of Simple Things. The story of fonts begins long before printing presses or computers. The earliest writing systems, like cuneiform in Mesopotamia or hieroglyphs in Egypt, weren't about style, they were about survival. Writing was invented to record trade, taxes, and laws. The goal was legibility, not beauty. But even then, humans being humans, style started creeping in. Scribes developed their own ways of drawing symbols. Some wrote with precise strokes, others added flourishes. Over time, these differences became distinct styles of writing. Think of it as the ancient version of choosing between Arial and Times New Roman. By the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans, letter forms started to become more standardized. Roman inscriptions, for example, used capital letters carved into stone, clean, geometric, and balanced. These classical Roman capitals are actually the ancestors of many modern fonts we use today. Fast forward to the Middle Ages. Every book had to be written by hand, and the people who did that, monks in monasteries, turned writing into an art form. They didn't just copy words, they designed them. Different regions developed their own handwriting styles, some tall and narrow, some round and smooth. The most famous of these was the Gothic script, dense, dark, and decorative. It looked beautiful but was incredibly hard to read. These handwritten styles were the precursors of fonts as we know them, because when the printing press arrived, it copied those very same handwritten designs. In the mid-1400s, Johannes Gutenberg revolutionized the world with his invention of the movable type printing press. For the first time, letters were not written by hand, but cast as individual metal blocks that could be reused to print entire books. But Gutenberg had to make a choice. What would his letters look like? He decided to base them on the Gothic script popular in Germany at the time. The result was the first printed font, blackletter. It was ornate and dense, mimicking the handwritten manuscripts people were used to. And it made sense. People trusted what looked familiar. But it was only the beginning. As printing spread across Europe, different regions began developing their own styles of type. In Italy, printers preferred something cleaner and easier to read. They created fonts inspired by classical Roman inscriptions, giving birth to what we now call Roman type. This was the first major font war in a sense. Gothic versus Roman. Germany stuck to the old heavy black-letter style, while much of Europe switched to the simpler Roman fonts. This tension between tradition and readability would define typography for centuries. By the 16th and 17th centuries, printing was everywhere. Books, pamphlets, and newspapers were multiplying. And with that came competition. Printers began using typography not just to communicate words, but to express identity. Each printer wanted their books to stand out. They commissioned new fonts, each with subtle differences in thickness, spacing, and shape. Suddenly, fonts weren't just tools, they were personalities. The Renaissance era also saw the rise of italics, invented by Aldus Manutius and his punch cutter, Francesco Griffo in Venice. Italics were originally created to fit more text on a page, but they quickly became a way to emphasize words, a kind of visual tone of voice. By the 18th century, typography became even more refined. Fonts like Baskerville and Bodoni emerged, showcasing sharper contrasts and elegant forms. These fonts were not just legible, they were stylish. Typography had officially become an art. Then came the 19th century and the Industrial Revolution. Suddenly, type wasn't just for books, it was for advertising. Posters, signs, and packaging all needed to grab attention. This changed everything. Fonts became bolder, louder, and more experimental. Fat, blocky letters, dramatic curves, shadows, outlines. Fonts were no longer just about readability, they were about impact. For the first time, people began choosing fonts to match moods and messages. A circus poster needed something playful and exaggerated. A newspaper headline needed something serious and authoritative. A perfume label needed something elegant and graceful. Different fonts told different stories. In the 20th century, technology once again changed typography. With the rise of mechanical typesetting and later digital design, creating fonts became easier than ever. This era brought us the classics we still use today: Helvetica, Times New Roman, Courier, Garamond, each designed for a specific purpose. Helvetica was born in Switzerland in the 1950s as a clean, neutral typeface that could fit anywhere, from subway signs to corporate logos. Times New Roman was created for the Times newspaper in London, optimized for tight columns and small print. Courier was designed for typewriters, with each letter taking up the same amount of space for perfect alignment. These fonts became so universal that they started to define eras, industries, and even emotions. Helvetica became the font of modernism. Times New Roman became the font of professionalism. Courier became the font of bureaucracy and scripts. Every font you see carries history in its strokes and choices made by designers over centuries. They're silent storytellers shaping how we experience language itself. So next time you open a document and scroll through that long list of font options, remember you're not just picking a style. You're choosing a voice, a history, and a feeling. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. If you enjoyed this video, please check out our other bingeable channels. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.